this is Janelle from Crowded Table Farmstead, and today we are going to talk about planting fruit trees. We planted fruit trees this fall on our new property. We knew that planting fruit trees was going to be one of the first things that we wanted to do here because they take so long to actually bear fruit. So we went ahead. We luckily have a really awesome greenhouse nearby that had a really good variety of peach, apple, and pear. And that's what we started out with. So I just want to talk about that process today, what we did. We're first timers, so this isn't going to be an expert tutorial, but I just thought I'd share what we did and how we went about that. So we chose dwarf varieties, mostly. There's a couple full size. The reason we did that was because, one, they're easier to harvest from. You can usually prune them to be able to reach the top, so you don't need a ladder. It's just a little safer and just all around easier. And also the dwarf trees usually produce quicker than the full-size trees. So we're trying to get a harvest in a couple years, maybe 3 to 5 years rather than 5 to 8 years. One disadvantage to dwarf fruit trees is that their lifespan is a little shorter. So, a full-size apple tree, can live to get for your own orchard. Of course, there's less fruit on dwarf fruit trees as well. So maybe a full-size tree, you might get 10 to 20 bushels of fruit depending on the tree. And the dwarf tree may only get 1 to 3 bushels. Now that's just fine for our family, the 1 to 3. We planted 4 peach trees, 4 apple trees, and 2 pear trees. And that'll be plenty for our family's needs, and even hopefully have a little to put up and a little to share with our community. So next I want to talk about the varieties that we chose. The apple trees we chose are a Pristine, and that's a dwarf variety. These are sweet, multi-purpose. The Honeycrisp Dwarf was the next one we chose, which is a sweet, juicy variety that has a good shelf life. When picking these varieties, I wanted to pick some that would last a long time in the fridge so that we can enjoy them into, the winter. We actually currently order our fruit from a local place that's just down the road. And we still have apples from our last pickup from them. And it's the end of December right now. And I think we ordered those probably in early October. So finding good varieties that last a long time when properly stored in the fridge was something that was important to us so that our harvest could last longer. Next, we planted a Honeygold Dwarf, and this is a cross between a Golden Delicious and a Honeycrisp. It's a good keeper, like I just sort of talked about, and really good for fresh eating. And then the last apple tree that we planted was a Cortland. Now this was the only full-size apple tree that we planted. It's a good keeper. They last in the fridge for 3 to 4 months, and it's a good multi-purpose apple that's also good for fresh eating as well. So we're excited to have one full-size apple tree to kind of compare the two, see, how much sooner the dwarf trees really do bear fruit and how much longer the Cortland will live in its full lifespan. So next I want to talk about the peach varieties. We opted for all dwarf peach varieties, and we looked for ones that were good for our area. We live in Northwest Ohio, so it's not really Georgia weather that's really great for growing peaches, but there are some varieties that are more adapted to our climate. So we went with 2 Red Haven peach trees. These are both dwarf varieties, and these are freestone peaches. So that means that when you cut into them and you open them up, the stone or the pit in the middle is free in there, and it's going to pop out really easily. If you've ever tried to process or deal with peaches that aren't freestone, it's really a pain, and you lose some of your fruit when you're trying to dig that pit out. So I opted for the freestone variety in the Red Haven, and those are good for our climate. They're good for canning, fresh eating, and they have sort of a creamy yellow flesh. The next one is a Reliance Peach. This is a good cold hardy variety as well, good for our climate. Freestone as well, and a sweet and juicy peach. The last peach we opted for is the Polly. This is a sweet white flesh variety that's also cold hardy and also freestone. So I just wanted to give you a little bit about these varieties so that you might be able to decide what fruit trees you want to plant on your own property. Lastly, we planted 2 Patten pear trees. Now the pear trees are both full size, so that's exciting again that we'll get a little more life out of them and a little bigger harvest. However, they're going to take a little longer to produce. And the pears are a little different in that they need a pollinator. So we had to go with 2 pear trees so that they could pollinate each other. The other varieties that we chose were self-pollinating, so we didn't necessarily need 2 of them. You know, just do your due diligence on looking at your labels when you pick out your trees. They'll usually say on there whether they're self-pollinating or need a pollinator, but it is something to keep in mind when you're picking those out. So we've got 2 Patten pear trees. This is going to be a big one. When I researched this variety, it says they grow to 35 feet tall. So I guess we're going to need a ladder for that one. So a little bit about the Patten pear variety. They're going to keep well in the fridge for about 3 months. And the interesting thing I learned about these is that they actually taste better after they're picked for about a month. So we harvest the Patten pears in late September when they're still firm. And then for best flavor, you actually let them sit for about a month and it would be good to go in October. These tend to be best for fresh eating, not necessarily canning. They might get a little too soft when canned. So we might freeze these, we might make pear sauce out of them, but mostly for fresh eating and to share again with our community. Patten pear, I read, can live up to 200 years. So that's pretty exciting. The people that live here next and next and next are probably gonna be able to enjoy pears off this tree. So it's kind of cool to think about that down the road, but we're excited to have pears of our own first. Now I'm gonna take you out to our orchard and show you a little bit of footage of when we initially planted these trees. Now I said a little earlier that it's late December right now. We did not plant these trees in late December. We planted them in late September. So just keep that in mind when you see the nice weather outside and no snow on the ground. It's best to plant fruit trees in the fall, in our area anyway. It sort of gets them established before it gets so hot. In Northwest Ohio, it doesn't get hot, but when it gets hot fast. It kind of goes straight from cold to hot. So planting things in the spring usually doesn't work out very well because by the time you can plant things and the ground isn't freezing, it gets hot right away. And new trees like to have a good amount of moisture, and it's just really hard to keep them watered well enough when it goes, you know, straight from winter to summer here. So that's why we chose to plant them in the fall. So if you'd like to see more of this process in real time, keep watching.
So the first thing we did was to map out where we were going to plant our trees. We decided to put them in the very back of our property. The sun rises in the front of our property and sets in the back. So we wanted to make sure that when the trees were full grown, they wouldn't block the rest of the vegetable garden from the sun. We spaced them about 15 feet apart, and we put little flags there to sort of mark where we were going to dig, and we started digging. We wanted to make the holes about twice as big as the root ball so that there was plenty of room for those roots to grow. This particular tree we were planting was a dwarf apple tree. Now, fruit trees are made dwarf by grafting a full-size tree to a dwarf rootstock. You can see this little knob here. That's the graft site. And so basically that dwarf rootstock only allows the tree to grow so big. And you just want to keep in mind when planting that you don't cover that graft site. You want to leave that above ground. When picking out your trees, you want to look for the ones that are the straightest at that graft site. Sometimes they can be a little wonky and cause your tree to be unstable or lean quite a bit. Now, you also want to pay attention to the leaves. These leaves weren't perfect, but they were the best that we could find at the nursery. It was pretty late in the season, and we just did the best with what we were given. So you want to look for healthy leaves, ones that aren't super curled up, ones that don't have a ton of rust spots or bugs or diseases, just the healthiest looking leaves you can. We loosened the soil in the bottom of the hole as much as we could so that the roots could really spread out and grow. And then we fertilized each hole with bone meal. Now, bone meal is very high in phosphorus, and this is great for when you initially plant your trees because it promotes root growth and not necessarily leaf and fruit growth. So we want it to focus on growing those roots to get established as soon as possible. You saw there that I had a bag of mulch, and that was just to top the hole once we had the tree in place. We did water the holes before we put the trees in. Here we have a strategic root ball removal. These trees are pretty good size. You know, a lot of times you get them pretty small. So I'm excited to see if we actually get fruit maybe a year or so earlier than the 3 to 5 years, because these are pretty nice established trees. So we adjusted it in the hole, made sure that it was standing as straight as possible. I did a really good job supervising there while my hubby did the hard labor. And then once we had it situated, we covered it back up with dirt, got it nice and secure in there. Once we had the hole filled in and everything was set, I put a little more of the bone meal around the plant on top. We really wanted to get these roots happy and healthy before winter hit. I watered it in. Half of the bone meal blew away. It was a really windy day when we did this. Not to mention our hose that was drug probably 200 yards from our house wasn't the best, but it got the job done. Basically, you just want to make sure you water it in really well and water it every day for a while if you don't get a good rain. These new trees really, really need to stay watered for the roots to get nice and established. So next I put on some mulch. Mulch also helps to keep that moisture in and keep the roots nice and healthy. This is a colored mulch. I probably wouldn't do this again if I could do it over. I would just do wood chip mulch, but this is what we got. We were in a hurry and wanted to get these in as soon as possible, and this is just what we picked up. So I got that all spread around so that we could more easily mow around the bases, and the tree was in. It took about 3 days altogether to get the orchard planted, and we couldn't be happier with how it turned out. Again, we planted 10 trees. We did 2 rows of 5, and we strategically put the taller ones in that back row again so that they didn't end up shading out the smaller trees and then the garden. So on the end here is the full-size Cortland and then the Patten pears and then the 2 dwarf apples. And in the front row, you can see are the 4 peach trees. And then there's another apple in the front corner here. So this is going to be sort of the anchor to our new garden. And I'm really excited to see how it comes together in the spring. We've always wanted fruit trees, and we're just really excited to have this opportunity to create this dream garden. Like I said, this is at the very back of our property, so you can see our house up there. We're clear in the back corner behind our pond. And all this in front of the orchard here is going to be raised bed garden.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you got some little tidbits of information from this video that you can use on your own property if you'd like to plant your own orchard, or even just when selecting the right variety of fruit for your family if you order in bulk from a local orchard. Until next time, thanks for stopping by our crowded table.